Welcome back to the Varsity Voices High School Sports Talk, your home for all things Chicago Catholic League football. I'm Joe Frevoletti, and here with me is my co-host, Dan Frevoletti. And this weekend brought us some high-stakes matchups, some lopsided wins, and even a thriller that came down to a missed kick in the final minutes. We'll break down all the games for you, so get ready. It's time to relive all the action from another unforgettable weekend in the Chicago Catholic League.
If you are looking to buy or sell a home, contact RE/MAX Realtor and Circle of Legends recipient Christopher Cobb. Let Chris's extensive negotiating experience work to guide you on all of your real estate buying and selling needs. Contact Christopher now to discuss the right strategy for your personalized real estate buying and selling plan. His number is 630-420-0070, or you can visit his website at christophercobb.com.
Dan, you and I talked about this past weekend and some of the games. And do you think it's safe for us to call it blowout weekend?
Blowout weekend.
Blowout weekend.
I do think that's safe.
Yeah.
I have one game that was within 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
That I followed. So yeah, definitely showed a bit of a disparity between some of the divisions this weekend in how the Catholic League goes about scheduling.
It did, and I was a bit surprised at that, and I shouldn't be. I know I shouldn't be, but, I see teams play in certain divisions, and I think that is a really talented and good team, and they should be able to compete with anybody, any other team in any division within the Chicago Catholic League. And then it doesn't happen, and I question it. I think, I question my judgment as to looking at a team and the talent it has when they go up against maybe, a team in the blue division or a team in one of the other divisions, and that team makes them look relatively normal, right?
Yes.
Versus, so I find that really interesting.
Yeah, it's a topic, Joe, we probably have to broach. Well, because the Catholic League will do it after this year too. So they will go back to the drawing board and redraw these divisions. And I don't know if it'll be straight relegation, as I always call it, or if it'll be something else, as to see how they redraw them to make them the most competitive, what they do with the schedules to make
Right.
it equitable, for as equitable as possible. It's still football. You still have 11 on 11.
Right.
And there's still some case where it's like, hey, your program's got to get a little better too.
Right. That's part of it.
Super easy to say from the comfort of my office here, but it is part of it.
Yeah. I think so too. And you and I have all the answers, and we do.
Yeah.
But we're not going to share that until the season's over. So everybody, you got to keep listening to us.
Yes.
And then be sure to tune in after the season, the playoffs are over, all that. And we will break all this down and give you the exact right formula for what the Chicago Catholic League should do, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so let's get into some of the games, Dan, and we'll just go back and forth here with some of the teams. So why don't you get us started with one of your games?
All right. Well, we'll start in blue versus purple. So Mount Carmel defeats Bennett 48-0. In control, literally from the opening kick. So Quentin Burrell returned the opening kick for a touchdown to get out to a lead. Some turnovers that happened for Bennett early on. This was the score at halftime. So Joe, the second half was all a running clock.
Yeah.
So Mount Carmel, certainly no letdown at all, really showed their level of talent against Bennett, and like I said, had control the whole game. They played a lot of people. Bennett got some decent efforts out there, but just nothing that they could do. They could not sustain anything without either turning it over on downs or turning the ball over. So a dominant performance for the Caravan.
Yeah. Okay. And any lessons learned, Dan, in that game?
It's tough, I think. Don't kick it to Quentin Burrell.
Don't kick to Quentin Burrell, right?
Yes.
All right, that's a good lesson. So everybody listening and anybody who's got Mount Carmel on their schedule going forward, do not kick it to Quentin Burrell. Right?
There's a few guys in the league I don't kick to.
Right.
I'd rather
He's one of them.
Start on the 35.
Yeah.
no
Zach
or
Zach
40, whatever it
Washington,
is.
maybe another one. Yeah.
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 So it's funny. Luke Doyle might be in that group for Bennett, and he was close a couple times. Yeah,
Was he?
that he
Yeah.
really did. But yeah, they could not quite muster anything. But that would be. I would not want to start the game that way.
No.
Especially so yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah. Other than that, lesson learned. Mount Carmel, very 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 good, very
Very good.
talented.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I think we're going to be saying that every week.
Yeah.
All right. So I've got the Brother Rice versus St. Pat's game, Dan, and Brother Rice won this game 56-14. I mean, just when you look at the scoring and what they did from quarter to quarter, Brother Rice jumped out to a 21-0 lead. I think it was 42-7 at halftime. It was really complete dominance over St. Pat's. I don't know if that's a huge surprise. We do know St. Pat's is getting better, right? And
Right.
we both think they're getting better and they look better out there on the field. But they ran into a team this year in Brother Rice or this past week that's really clicking on all cylinders: offense, defense, and special teams. I mean, they are a complete team, and they're 5-0 now. And
Yeah.
I think that they've got to be a favorite, whatever division they end up in the playoffs. They've got to be a favorite in that division, and they've got to be highly ranked. I'm sure they are. I don't know what their ranking will be, but we'll see. That'll come out this week sometime.
Yeah, and I think they've been one that maybe has bounced around from 4A or 6A to 7A to 5A. So we'll see where they end up. That's going to make for some interesting playoffs. But they're
Yeah,
in.
they're in.
That's the other thing. Yeah, Mount Carmel is in officially.
Right.
So Brother
Carmel,
Rice and Mount
Brother
Carmel
Rice.
both in. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And for St. Pat's, I wouldn't, if it were me, I wouldn't look at this as a real negative, going up against a Brother Rice team and losing, to this extent or to, giving up that many points. But, I really think like they're making really good progress. And, I think this is one of those games, and you could say this as a coach, this is one where you don't even think about it for 24 hours. The game is over. It's like boom, we are putting that aside and we're looking towards our next game already.
Yeah, because they're back in the division next week. So both of those first two games we covered, Bennett and St. Pat's, both getting blown out, play
Yeah.
each other this week. So it's a good lesson learned for both. So I'm sure there's things you can take away from it. We both thought St. Pat's might might put up a little more of a fight,
Hmm.
but just not ready. What you don't want to have is a doubt creep in, and you've got to
Right.
kind of flush that out of the system, like you said, as quickly as possible, so you get
Right.
back to feeling confident and feeling like you can win your next game and whatever you need to get in.
Yeah. Okay.
Joe, sticking with the blue,
All right.
St. Ignatius, another blowout, 44-3 over St. Viator. And the one thing that I've noticed with St. Ignatius is they are getting better. They're getting
Yeah.
better. I
Okay.
think they're playing a lot of young guys on both sides of the ball. They've got some experienced linemen, but they are doing what they do. That with that option game and the wing option and it's very effective. Saint Viator did not have an answer for it. They even the first lesson trying to defend that is stop the fullback, and Saint Viator had a really hard time doing that. St. Ignatius has a couple different fullbacks that they use. Looks like one who's a little more shifty, and one who's a grinder.
Yeah.
And it was really effective. And St. Viator, the same thing. I feel like offensively, week after week, they're able to move the football, and they just cannot get it in the end zone. On
Hmm.
a consistent basis. So it's either a
Yeah.
late turnover, a turnover on downs. It's got to be very frustrating because they seem like they're a little better than what their record indicates right now, but they're just struggling finishing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm sure that's frustrating for Coach Gould, but also, it's his first year there as their head coach.
Yeah.
And, you've said this, and I haven't really seen him play all that much, but it does seem like he's got them pointed in a good direction here. It's just a matter of getting his system in place, probably, and getting, a couple other things in place there too before they kind of take that next step.
Yeah. And we talked about Ignatius being backs against the wall. They needed that win. That moves them to 2-3. So they're back in the division this week. So that'll be a big challenge, because their division's loaded. But it's definitely a step forward. And like I said, the week before they frustrated Mount Carmel a little bit. So we'll see if they can keep building.
Yeah. Inviter is at 1-4 for them.
Yes,
Yeah. Okay. All right. So backs against the wall there.
for sure.
For sure. All right. So we'll stick in the blue division, Dan, and this was Loyola versus DePaul Prep. This fell into our kind of category for the weekend of another blowout. Loyola wins this game over DePaul Prep 40-14, and it really wasn't all that close. Now, DePaul Prep did score the first touchdown in this game, but then it was all Loyola from there on out. In the second quarter, Loyola scored 3 touchdowns. They spread the ball around. They ran the ball. They passed the ball. They had a 3-yard touchdown run by Milo Maldonado, 49-yard run by Jaden Garrett, 2-yard run by Cody Riley. They also had a touchdown by Fowler in the end zone. At halftime, this game was 35-7, and then Loyola just kind of coasted from there. So Loyola, interesting team this year, Dan. They're young. They might be another one like you just mentioned about St. Ignatius that is starting to get their feet underneath them and get the feel for what it's like to play in this league and to win games in this league. And they really showed some dominance in this game. So we'll see how they do going forward now.
You felt like they looked big too, right?
They do look big. Yeah. I remember when you and I coached and, it was only the freshmen, right? But I remember the two teams that just surprised me seeing the kids come out on the field. One was Joliet Catholic, the other was Loyola. They just do something different there as far as as far as building big guys.
Right.
Thighs are huge, their shoulders are wide. Where do they find these kids? But I think they develop them. Loyola looks really good. Yeah. They're physical and they've got some skilled players as well that they can really count on. So they're going to be a team to reckon with, as the rest of the season goes
Yeah.
through, goes forward.
It's weird to say Loyola is going to be a handful, right? But because they were their program identity, but yeah, that's kind of how it feels. So Brother Rice and Mount Carmel, you know,
Yeah.
or I mean Mount Carmel has to pay attention, right?
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Joe. Moving on, we've got uh, probably the best game that I was able to watch this past weekend was St. Francis 47 over Providence 35. And
Listen,
yeah, it was entertaining, and it was literally the tale of two different teams. St. Francis just airball. Milivojevic 4 touchdowns. Zach Washington had a touchdown, a return touchdown. They are just their passing game. Brock Phillip, just incredible stats again. I have to see if I have him here. 331 yards, 5 touchdowns. He's
yeah,
great. He is really, really good. And they have. There was concern about the quarterback position after a transfer in the
right.
offseason, but they have absolutely picked up where they left off, and they look even more dangerous with the experience that those guys have
Yeah,
on the offensive side of the ball. Providence, on the other hand, they can run. Their running game is awesome. It is really something to watch. The issue they have is that it looks like if they do if they get down a touchdown or two, they have a tough time scoring quickly to come back. Now they might break a long run, but theoretically, because they're so running dominant, they have a tough time. And if is it Brock Modert? I'm trying to think of the running back there. Anyway, had 155 yards rushing. Really good game for them, but they tied the game early after scoring to cut it to 7. Onside kick that they recovered, score to tie it up. I said this Friday night. So it's 28-28. They kick the ball off. Zach Washington returns it for a touchdown. It's like, oh, you could feel the air let out of the balloon.
lesson learned there.
Lesson learned. Some
Don't.
some kicking game lessons. Yes, yes, yeah. But St. Francis, on a roll a little bit this season. They did they move to 4-1, Joe?
I think they are.
Yeah, 4-1.
Yeah.
Providence goes to 3-2. So St. Francis they're 47. Providence 35.
Okay. And the other, that was a good game. This game, IC versus Marist was another good game.
The game of the weekend, I think, in the league.
Game of the weekend, yeah.
Yeah.
And this game came right down to the end. Marist ends up pulling this game out 29-28. Um, Marist built a lead through three quarters. I think they were up by 10 starting the fourth quarter, but IC it did not give up, right? You know, their their quarterback, Nate Lang, had another really good game, throwing to some of the wide receivers there. Penna is one. I think Foley Calcagno scored another touchdown. But, Marist was tough when it counted on defense. And, unfortunately, what hurt IC in this game was some extra points, Dan. I think
That's a
one
killer.
extra point they missed or was tipped and blocked, and then came down to, I think there was only a little bit over a minute left, and IC got the ball down to, I think, the 30, 35-yard line. That's a long kick for a high school kicker, but he kicked it wide left. So, those extra points are important. You don't think
Yeah.
at the time, but when it comes down to a 1 point game like this, you can't beat good football teams in this league, I think, if don't pay attention to all three aspects of the game, right? To perform really well in all three aspects of the game.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's funny, Joe. We started. We were wondering if there was going to be a theme to this as we talked before we came on. Seems like there's one developing, doesn't it? Kicking game.
Kicking game.
Yes.
It's just as important as offense and defense,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you see how it makes a difference in these games.
Yes.
Would not have made a difference in my next game, Joe.
Okay.
Carmel beat Marion Catholic 7-7.
Wow.
Yeah, and the
That's incredible.
most
Yeah.
points scored this week. Yeah, they were pretty much unstoppable. Trey Taylor at 6 TDs. The quarterback stars came out this weekend in the game, and he was incredible. Their defense is regularly swarming and just stifling of Marion Catholic. They at will is, I guess, the best way to say it. So
Yeah.
it was a dominant performance for Carmel. I think that also puts them at 4-1.
It
So
does.
yeah,
Yeah.
so they're one win away. So from guaranteeing a spot, which is really, that's a big deal coming off last year when it was kind of disappointing that they didn't make it in, and
Right.
they're gonna be a problem whatever level they're at as well. So they get a huge win. Marion Catholic's got to regroup a little bit, be back in the red division this week. So hopefully, it can be more competitive.
Yeah. And there was another quarterback with 6 touchdowns thrown, Dan, too. And guess who that was? This was in the Nazareth versus Joliet Catholic game.
Yeah, I did see that.
Jackson
Jackson
Faya,
Faya.
Faya,
Faya.
Faya.
Help us
We
out,
will figure
people.
that out. We're
Yeah,
gonna have to have Jackson on maybe.
right.
And just an outstanding game. Threw 6 touchdown passes. 4 of those went to Jake Sestone, who was just outstanding as well on offense. And this game was essentially over, by halftime. Nazareth had built a huge, huge lead. I think in the first half, Joliet Catholic, they really struggled on the offensive side of the ball through 3 interceptions. Nazareth defensive backs played really well. Uh, Joliet Catholic did get a little bit of offense in the second half, but like I said, this game was over by halftime. Did I give the final score 48-21 Nazareth? I think it was 42 or 41-7 at halftime. So they kind of coasted after that. Nazareth did. So Nazareth improves to 4-1, while Joliet Catholic squarely in the BATW club. They drop to 1-4 now. So they put themselves in a really tough spot, and schedule doesn't get any easier for them going forward. So yeah, that's that game. And let's see.
I've got Joe. I can go next, and another kind of a blowout was St. Rita over Notre Dame. So
Okay.
that final was 48-13.
Yeah.
And this was not maybe that blowout from the get-go. It was St. Rita kind of adding on as the game went on. I don't know if it maybe got to a running clock in the fourth quarter, late in the third quarter. But yeah, St. Rita in total control, very good in all aspects. Really, really flew around defensively and kind of set, maybe not set Notre Dame back. That's a bad way of saying it, but just kind of showed them that they still have a little bit of ways to go. And
Similar, or it's kind of similar to St. Pat's,
yeah,
isn't it? I feel
yeah,
like
it
St.
is.
Pat's and Notre Dame are very similar at this point.
Yeah, you're right. It's funny that's those two rival programs are in a similar spot. So, but yeah, we St. Rita needed that victory. We said they were BATW, so they moved to 2-3 back in their division this week. So things get a little more challenging, but they were able to kind of win one going away on the road, 48-13 at Notre Dame.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And another blowout was the Fenwick versus De La Salle game. And we kind of figured this, but like you just said, this didn't turn into a blowout until really kind of almost end of the second quarter at halftime. I think it was 21-0. Towards the end of the first half. Um, and De La Salle, even though they couldn't move the ball on offense very well, they were holding their own a little bit on defense, which was good. Definite talent and size disparity here between Fenwick and De La Salle. The final score was 42-0, Fenwick over De La Salle. So Fenwick's defense posts a shutout here. And Fenwick now is believe they are 4-1 as
Mm-hmm.
well. Yeah, and De La Salle goes to 0-5. So Fenwick, they're in a good spot. They haven't clinched a playoff berth yet, but and their schedule, does get tough from here on out. But Fenwick, another kind of dominant showing here against De La Salle with a 42-0 win.
All right, Joe. My final game, I've got St. Lawrence defeated Leo, 41-0. I think was the final there. Yeah, 41-0, and over Leo on Saturday. So that played at Saint Xavier. It, like we've said about a couple of the teams, maybe a little setback, or just kind of showing you how far you have to go. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Leo had several turnovers. St. Lawrence was able to score. Running. They used a trick play. Corey Less scored on a touchdown run, and he threw a pass for a touchdown. So
Doing it
so
all. Doing
yeah,
it
they
all. Yeah.
he's definitely that kind of guy. St. Lawrence played both their quarterbacks again. They seem to be very content splitting time between Jimmy McDermott and Noah Taylor. So they both played well. Both had touchdowns. One, I think McDermott's may have been running. I don't know if he had a passing TD or not. But anyway, so St. Lawrence moves to 4-1 and Leo to 2-3. Leo plays De La Salle next week, so kind of a red letter game. I think that's one to keep an eye on to see. It's a good barometer game for both those programs. And then St. Lawrence back in the white. So things heat up in intra division play.
I'm not going to question that at all.
All right.
All right, so my last game, another blowout, another shutout, Dan. This is Montini and Marmion, and Montini wins this game 47-0 over Marmion, which, is a bit of a surprise, I think, to you and me.
Yeah,
The
it was.
dominant
Score for sure.
score for sure.
Yeah.
Montini scored on their first 5 possessions. Israel Abrams, another good game here. He threw for, I think, just over 250 yards, couple of touchdown passes. Montini had a special teams touchdown. Luco Florio, I'm thinking that's Santino's younger brother, right?
Yeah, that's a good guess.
Good guess. He returned a punt, 67 yards for a touchdown. So he's filling right in where Santino left off, right?
Yep.
And he had a rushing TD. Isaac Alexander scored a couple touchdowns rushing. Damasio Ortegon, touchdown pass. So Montini pretty dominant on offense. They were also dominant on defense. I think they held Marmion to under 20 yards rushing in the whole game and just about 100 or then 10 yards total offense. So hopefully that's something Marmion can put behind them as well, Dan,
Yeah.
because I know they've had some good things happening in that program, and maybe it's just like that what you just mentioned. It shows them, just what some of the next steps they're going to have to take in order to compete with some of the best programs in the Chicago Catholic League.
Yeah, it is. It is a good week for that to kind of see where you're at. You know.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is. Right.
Yep.
Unfortunately, maybe where you're seeing where you're at is not where you were hoping you would be at.
Correct.
So, with all these blowouts and shutouts, Dan, there have to have been some really good defensive performances, right? Really good individual performances as well as team performances, and it is that time of the week.
Favorite moment.
Everyone's favorite moment. They love to hear Zuko. So yeah, it's time to talk about the Zuko's in the dog pound and announce the dog of the week, Dan.
Yeah, Joe. So why don't you cover some of the players that you have, and we obviously we talked about our dog of the week, but we want to make sure we recognize those who are in the dog pound this
Yeah,
week and highlight their performances.
yeah. There were a couple from the Loyola game, like we talked about in our recap. How dominant Loyola was on offense and on defense, and holding DePaul Prep's offense down. They have a sophomore linebacker there, Dan. Will Matei, I believe is how you say his name. And I saw a little bit of some of the highlights and clips. And this is a kid, he's only a sophomore. He is fast. He runs from sideline to sideline and makes a lot of plays. So, I was thinking in my head as I was watching him, he's only a sophomore.
Yes.
What is this guy going to be like over the next 2.5 years, right? As
Right.
he gets better
Right.
and better. Also, their defensive line. I mean, they held DePaul Prep down, like I said, on the offensive side of the ball. And Kai Calcutt, big force on their defensive line. Just really bottling out DePaul Prep, putting pressure on their quarterback all game. So he was another one, really good game. I think that was it as
Yeah.
far as the two guys, other than the other one we talked about.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So a couple I want to mention in the dog pound, Sean Rice from St. Lawrence. So he's been in the pound before. He's a
Yeah.
player. He had a strip sack against St. Lawrence, and they just they kind of have a dominating. They're a building swarming defense there that they're starting to lean on, and Sean Rice seems to be one of the leaders of that. Jalen Torres from St. Francis. This is one. While I talked about Providence's running game, Jalen Torres jumps off the film like he makes. You're limited when you're inside like that, playing a one or a three technique, but when they come his way, he tends to erase that play. And so he had a really nice game. You saw him make a lot of plays, kind of an all over, owning his area during that St. Francis victory. Santino Tenuta, he's just a guy that constantly is, he's a dog in waiting, I think,
He is.
because
We mention him every week, and it's not just because we like the name Santino either.
right. It's kind of, but anyway, no, he earns it. He earns it. He three tackles for loss for Montini again in their dominant performance of over Marmion. Joe Connor Heights, junior safety from St. Ignatius. It's hard to see sometimes as we're watching these games, but he's a guy that sticks out. He's a big kid, tall kid, rangy, makes a lot of plays. Frustrated St. Viator's passing game was impactful in the run. He's a guy that is all over the field. So that's it for my dog pound. Are we ready
Okay,
to announce the Zuko's dog of the week?
we are. We are ready, Dan.
So Joe, with 12 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, and a sack, and just part of that dominating performance, holding Marmion Academy under 20 yards rushing. Ben Evanson from Montini Catholic. Zuko's dog of the week. Congratulations to Ben. He earned it. They have we thought that they would be way more offense and might give up a bunch of points. They've definitely got an attitude defensively that they carry from year to year. So
Yeah.
and they highlight those guys that have that ability to make a lot of plays and put them in the right spots. And Ben certainly stepped up and earned that this week.
Yeah, one of the things I love about Montini and their defense, and I got to give kudos to the head coach and their defensive coordinator, Dan, because we know the number of star players they lost last year off of that really good defense, and they've found some new studs this
Yeah, they
year
just
as well
reloaded.
as they just reloaded. And Ben Evenson, a name that we haven't really mentioned much over the first 4 weeks of the season or so. I mean, him along with the defensive back, I can't think of his name right now, but they just have kind of exploded onto the scene here, right? And they are making big plays all over. So that spells trouble for the rest of the Chicago Catholic League.
It does. It does. It's going to make for a really interesting white division.
It is.
It's a lot of fun watching that. Well, we always love that one, and it's about to heat up.
Yeah, it is. So congratulations again to Ben Evenson, this week's Zuko's Dog of the Week winner. All right, so that's a wrap on this week's Chicago Catholic League recap. We had some blowouts that we talked about and some nail biters, and the Chicago Catholic League once again has proved why it's one of the toughest conferences in Illinois, if not the country. We'll be back this week with our predictions, some player spotlights, and everything you need to know heading into next week's matchups. Be sure to follow, subscribe, and share the Varsity Voices so you don't miss a single snap. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon under the Friday Night Lights.